From Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, this is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at the medical school. Great to be with you again. And at the time I'm recording this, we just turned the calendar over to 2024, which means there's another admissions cycle coming up down the road, not too far away. And for a lot of people, this is they're going to start thinking about applying this spring. And so I think this is a great opportunity to bring those people. And even if you're early in the game, or you're a parent, or you're in high school, and you kind of want to know what this process is all about, there's a whole host of resources out there from the AAMC. And recently, they shared out some new resources, and when I saw them, I was like, "Oh, this is great! I want to try to collaborate with some people from the AAMC." So I reached out to them, and they were happy to join me. And so I have a couple people with me today that oversee some of these resources, and in particular, they revamped their competencies, which we really dive into in the first half. In the second half of the conversation, we dive into all these resources that are out there. So this episode, you'll hear us reference often to check out the show description notes, where you'll find links to all of our resources that we discuss. So please check those out, because it's going to give you more context, and obviously it's going to direct you to where these resources are located. So let me tell you about who my guests are today that you're going to be hearing from. The first person in the first half of the conversation is Dr. Laura Fletcher, and she's the Senior Research Analyst in Admissions and Selection Research and Development Team at the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges. Since joining the AAMC in 2017, Laura has been involved in numerous projects related to designing and validating selection systems for medical school and residency, including standardized video interviews, updates to the ERAS and AMCAS applications, and the preview exam. Dr. Fletcher received her PhD in Industrial Organizational Psychology from George Mason University. Then the second person you're going to hear from in this conversation is Tami Levin, and she's the Director of Premed and Applicant Resources at the AAMC. Over her tenure at the AAMC, Tami has developed and managed the Medical School Admissions Requirements, also known as MSAR, the Official Guide to Medical School, the Aspiring Docs Program and Resources, Anatomy of an Applicant Resources, and the Virtual Medical School Fairs. She and her staff work with pre-health advisors, medical school admissions officers, and others to develop tools and resources to help learners and applicants prepare for the application to medical school and beyond. So again, this is an episode, I think it's for all people, except if you're in the application process right now, you really don't need this. But if you're thinking about applying this coming cycle or in future cycles, I think this is a good one for you to kind of tap into and to familiarize yourself with some of their resources. So here we go. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. It's so great to have you both here. Dr. Fletcher, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for joining me.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And feel free to just call me Laura.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Tami Levin, thank you so much for being here. And it's great to have your voice added to the conversation.
My pleasure.
Too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, listen, you have a wealth of resources through the AAMC, and this kind of started, Tami, we were going back over this, that she put out an email to, or like a posting on the National Pre-Health Advisors listserv about all these resources AAMC has and some new ones. And I thought, this is a new podcast episode. So I reached out to you, and that's how we got here. So there's so many resources, and there's been some updates to some of the things. So I want to start with, I think maybe the place to start is with these pre-med competencies.
Yeah. Sure.
And let's first kind of talk about, let me do this, because I know there's people listening right now, and they're running, they're on the train, they're pipetting, they're walking their dog. So let me just read these competencies real quick so that listeners can have an idea of what these are before we kind of dig into how you got there, how important they are, that kind of thing. So here they are. There are 3 categories. Category 1 is professional. So here we go. Commitment to learning and growth. cultural awareness, cultural humility, empathy and compassion, ethical responsibility to self and others, interpersonal skills, oral communication, reliability and dependability, resilience and adaptability, service orientation, teamwork and collaboration. So that's category 1. The second category is thinking and reasoning, critical thinking, quantitative reasoning, scientific inquiry, and written communication. And then the final category is science, human behavior, and living systems.
Yep,
so there's the big picture. There's the 17 pre-med categories. So Laura, start us off. Give us a little background. How did these come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first version of this competency model was actually developed about a decade ago, and it was a way to identify the various competencies that are important for student success when they enter medical school. So the competencies highlighted what it takes to be a great physician requires more than, well, a combination of medical knowledge and expertise, but also things like social, cultural, and interpersonal skills. So we're talking, as you mentioned, like communication, respect, trustworthiness, compassion, those other types of non-book learning type of things. But recently, in the past decade, the healthcare environment and society has changed. And so medical education is similarly changing to better support student learning and meet society's changing healthcare needs. So we recognized we really needed to review possible updates to the competencies to make sure they still accurately described what was needed for new medical students in today's world.
So it's been about 10 years. And then recently, there's been some updates.
That's correct.
So you talked a little bit about how the landscape has changed in healthcare and society, without a doubt. So what was the process for making these updates? Because that had to be a pretty big undertaking. It
was a fun project, though. And one thing we wanted to focus on was, of course, listening to the community. So our team at the AAMC worked with people across medical education. So we collaborated and ran focus groups with, medical school faculty, staff, students from over 100 MD and DO schools, as well as pre-health advisors. So really ran the gambit on trying to get everyone's different perspectives, because we wanted to understand how the medical school curriculum and environment has changed, to know what competencies might need edits and how we might need to revise them. So our discussions around these changes were really able to highlight various qualities and characteristics of students who are better prepared for and more easily able to navigate the first 2 years of medical school, because these are really entering competencies for starting medical school.
Right.
And they really all happen to be related to those professional competencies. So that first grouping that you talked about are listed. And so the key thing that we, sort of found was that all the original competencies were still really relevant and important, but there are particular dimensions within each competency that have become more important and needed to be emphasized or elaborated on a bit better to really reflect the current and also future expectations of entering medical students.
So when you started doing these focus groups and talking with all these people from, like you said, like over 100 medical, like MD and DO schools, what were some of the key things you guys unearthed when you were doing that?
Yeah, so there are definitely some consistent changes that have been happening to medical school curriculum over the past decade. And so some of those things are like students are learning in a wide variety of settings. So both in-person, virtual settings, large, small groups, and alongside other healthcare professionals, lots of interprofessional teamwork is happening. Clinical experiences are happening earlier and they're appearing throughout the curriculum. So now sometimes clinical stuff starts M1, right at the beginning. And there's also a lot more content related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just specific classes on that, but really those DEI topics being integrated into classes and sort of throughout the curriculum. There's also...
Were there themes that you guys saw? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So there were some key themes that emerged across several competencies, things like perspective taking, emotional intelligence, humility, growth mindset, tolerance for ambiguity. I mean, that's not a complete list. That's just sort of some of them. And these things kept coming up over and over as being really important for supporting that transition from undergraduate and into medical school.
Well, if people have been listening to this podcast for a little while, those types of characteristics come up in some of my conversations with deans and directors at other schools. They say things, we look for growth mindset, or we value emotional intelligence, or we look for the ability to handle ambiguity. And so this is kind of lining up, right? The competencies that you're listing or have developed are being used in the evaluation process, which we'll talk a little bit about more in a little bit. So when you made these updates, you said that you found that they were all still relevant, but some of the dimensions of them had to change. What were some of the types of the updates that you made to the competencies?
That's a good question. Okay, so I would say there's like two general types of updates. So as I mentioned, and as you said, the original competency is still very relevant and important. And some of the majority of competencies just had some elements that we needed to highlight or elaborate. So I'll give you two examples if that works. Ethical responsibility to self and others. So that needed to be updated to focus more on the ethical reasoning and adherence to ethical principles rather than just simple rule following, right? That's something, that nuanced thinking, that moral reasoning aspect. Teamwork and collaboration was updated to emphasize the importance of considering others' expertise and experience when figuring out your role in a team. So it's not just about being a leader. Sometimes it's it's about being a team member and giving someone else with the expertise or knowledge and experience the role of leader in a given situation. The other sort of general type of update we did was to two competencies that we found to be a bit more multifaceted or complex. So those were cultural competence and service orientation. So as we discussed these two competencies with the medical school community, they really stress the importance of each of them being split into two standalone competencies to both signal their unique importance, but also to ensure all aspects got the proper attention they deserved. So cultural competence was divided into two competencies. Cultural awareness, as you mentioned, focused on pieces related to like the attitude and value one has towards different people, cultures, backgrounds, things like that. And the cultural humility piece focused on the pieces related to perspective taking, openness to differences, and that self-reflection piece. So both equally important, sort of just to highlight. Yeah. Then service orientation was split into two competencies, one being this new service orientation definition that really focused on being committed to helping others, something larger than yourself. And then the empathy and compassion was broken off to focus on that piece around the emotional connection and the desire to help and connect with others.
There's going to be a lot of links to resources in the show description for this episode. And we're covering this in a really high level way, but there is a whole document on the pre-med competencies that'll be linked in the show description. I just want listeners to know that you're not only have the competencies, but then you have this description of what it looks like or what it means. And so I'm just going to read this. Like Laura, you just mentioned like empathy and compassion. And so the definition or like the dimension of it is defined as recognizes, understands, and acknowledges others' experiences, feelings, perspectives, and reactions to situations, is sensitive to others' needs and feelings, and demonstrates a desire to help others and alleviate others' distress. Yep. So nice little definition there, giving people to understand, like, what do you mean by empathy and compassion? Because sometimes I think, especially something like empathy and compassion, it's not always easy to put your finger on what that looks like.
That's right. And that's part of the reasons why we workshop the definitions, right? We wanted to make sure the language is easily understandable and accessible to different applicant types, and just sort of that, it's a really digestible definition, so you can understand and see key descriptions of what it is we're talking about for each competency.
And then in a few minutes, we're going to bring Tami in, and she's going to talk about some of these new checklist or like these new resources that how students can help kind of document or show how they've demonstrated it through their experiences as they get ready to prepare themselves for the application process. So we've got this mapped out. All right, Laura, let's talk a little bit about why are these important? Like, so what?
Yeah, no, I'm going to simplify it into sort of three general things, and then we can take it from there if you want. So there are many reasons why these competencies can be, are really important. But mainly our hopes for this competency model are, I guess there's three facets. So first, it's a common competency model across all medical schools, right? The MD/DO schools. Mm-hmm. And the competencies really accurately reflect and communicate medical schools' current values and their current expectations for applicants and advisors, to help support their preparation and development. So students know what they need to enter medical school and be successful, both to develop as a medical student and to learn. Second, I'd say to offer this updated framework for medical school admissions to use as part of their holistic review. So knowing that a lot of medical schools are using competency-based evaluation to help them sort of structure and evaluate which competencies maybe are really important for their medical school. And then lastly, to serve as a foundation, we hope for future admissions work. So including updates to the MCAS application or future admissions assessments, just making sure that everyone's on the same page, has the same understanding and that same sort of benchmark that we're using consistently.
Yep. I can tell you from an admissions perspective that not just CASE, but a lot of medical schools will find the competencies, the ones that they value that tie to their mission or tie to pieces of their curriculum, and use this in the screening process of the application. They'll use it at the admission or sometimes the interview questions are around some of these competencies. And the next level, at the admissions committee level, looking for certain competencies that, again, tie to other aspects of their school that tie into their curriculum and tie into student affairs. So there's this longitudinal kind of arc where why these are important and how schools can use them. And so I think that talking a little bit about how can prospective applicants use these?
Right. And so I think that's a great point. Like the key considerations, right? And we have key considerations for applicants in medical school. So let's start with applicants, right? And you can ask me follow up for medical schools. But so I think it's important that these competencies are understood as a starting point of a roadmap used in the development of becoming a successful physician. So these competencies serve as like a foundation for their development during medical school. Applicants need to proactively look for experiences, though, that can help them develop in each competency so that they have the complete set of skills needed to support their learning and success during medical school. And, as you mentioned during our conversation earlier, students can seek out opportunities, though, through a wide range of options. So it's not just faculty, mentors, advisors, but also in their community. And they don't have to be experiences that are medically related. They could be experiences related to their own interest and values. So things that they're passionate about. That's a great way to develop the range of competencies and then sort of think about it and self-reflect. And we recognize that, students are going to have strengths and weaknesses across the range of competencies, similar to how people have strengths and weaknesses in different knowledge or content areas. Like maybe you're stronger in math than in other things, but you need to have some sort of base minimum level in order to really succeed in medical school. So it's important that students recognize this competency model is a standard set of competencies that they should aim for when they're applying to medical school. I want to just hop in here and ask you, though, I from my perspective, if somebody were to ask me, do I have to have demonstrated competence or dare say mastery in all 17? No. Right? Like, do you have to you can show that you're working in some of these areas, but you've been exposed to some, or you're aware that this is something I'm working at. I have some strengths and weaknesses. I'm far better in some than I am in others. What do you think about that? Yeah. So I it's a balance, right? Between you don't want to view them as a checklist. So it's not, in that respect, competencies are really best viewed as a development tool to help guide the applicant's journey. You're never really done developing competencies. So in that respect, like, it's a continuation. You're just beginning the journey. But at the same time, they are sort of the set of expectations for entering medical school. Like, if you have all of these things, you'll be a stronger medical student. The transition will be better. So it is one of those balanced things where students should seek to develop sort of as all competencies as they're described. But as you explained with empathy and compassion, they're not like, it's not some mastery level. We're not expecting them to suddenly enter medical school as physicians, but like, understand other people, be willing to listen to them and be willing to help. So all of the way that the competencies are described are what entering medical students should be seeking, to do. But again, it's that idea that the purpose is to develop for the sake of improvement, not to reach some final endpoint.
Exactly. Wait, say that again. I think that is key.
Okay. So the purpose is to develop the competencies for the sake of improvement, not to reach some final endpoint.
It's right. It's not a checkbox. It's not like, okay, this X number of hours done, and that means I've achieved competency in this thing. So I know a lot of times prospective applicants want to, what level of this do I have to hit to, like, say that I'm done? And what you're saying, Laura, is this could be a continual thing. And then as I'm looking at some of these competencies, like, say, cultural awareness, the more people you get exposed to, the more culturally aware you can become of people's backgrounds, lived experiences.
That's right.
And this is one thing, just say, like, you've recognized that the few people maybe you've been exposed to as, say, an undergrad will continue as you continue to be exposed to a broader population of people, but you recognize that there's an awareness that you have to have in interacting with different kinds of people from different walks of lives. There's not necessarily like an endpoint.
That's right. Exactly. And it's important that they see, not everyone has the same opportunities necessarily, but if you recognize, I don't have that many opportunities for cultural awareness, to seek them out, in different ways. It could just be reading or trying to talk to people from different areas. There's many ways to develop that. And one thing you mentioned, that self-awareness piece, I think is really important to sort of build out a little bit, because a key part of this is the role of self-reflection, which we heard over and over again from medical schools about how important that is, and how applicants really need to reflect on what they've learned during all of these different experiences, and how it relates to competencies, and how they might need to find other experiences or push themselves to develop some of these competencies further. And Tami will be able to discuss this more about how the resources we have really connect to that and support that self-reflection development. Because again, self-reflection, self-awareness is really key.
I want to emphasize something, Laura, that one of the reasons why I wanted to have this podcast conversation with you is because oftentimes when I meet with prospective applicants, we talk about the experiences they could be getting involved in on campus, and volunteering and things, and shadowing or work history is important. But to understand that when you're doing those, you can be thinking about these kind of competencies and thinking about how can I grow in this area, being a member of this organization, or when I go clock into work, what things can I be thinking about? Reliability and adaptability. Even if it's not at a hospital, it's at Panera, like, you're still building experiences and characteristics and life experience and things you can grow and build from that are part of these competencies. It doesn't have to be under the umbrella of it's all about pre-med medical school kind of stuff.
That's
right?
Exactly right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about how this is important from the student perspective and why are these kind of key considerations. Say a little more about the medical school.
Right. So from the medical school side, right, because this is sort of multi-purpose tool we're hoping for. While all the competencies are important to students' development, it's not a one-size-fits-all for medical schools. So some competencies may be more important than others for particular schools, given their mission, values, or curriculum, things like that. And so schools may tailor their own admissions process to focus on or like prioritize candidates with certain competencies that align with that mission and values. And it's also possible that some medical schools will have some competencies that are sort of unique based on their own mission and values, and they may not be totally captured in the model. So that's one thing to be aware of. Another thing for medical schools to consider is that it's important for them to be flexible and acknowledge that, as you were saying earlier, that there are many different ways students can develop these competencies. There aren't a specific set of experiences that allow students to develop. So it's not a one-to-one necessarily do this to develop this competency. That's not what we're talking about. It's again, it's not a one size fits all for how pre-health students develop the competencies. So that's a key thing. And then lastly, last little point. We did hear from a lot of medical school faculty and staff that some of medical schools may need to make adjustments or think about making adjustments to their curriculum or culture to better prepare and support medical students as they develop these competencies while they're attending their school. So not all medical schools are quite there as far as being able to support all of the aspects of cultural humility or cultural awareness or that interprofessional sort of teamwork collaboration piece. And so it's sort of highlighting that to something the medical school community mentioned, like this highlights also to our community what's important to us.
Yeah. While you were saying that, Laura, I was thinking of a good example of this would be my last episode, actually, with the Dean of Admissions from Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine. And I had a link in there to their admissions page that has the competencies that they value that tie to parts of their curriculum. So this is a perfect, I didn't mean to do this, but a really good, perfect conversation to have after that one to kind of tie these together to see, we're having this conversation about these competencies. Northwestern's an example of how they do it, like how they're telling applicants very transparently, these are things we value, what we're looking for in our applicants, and then how it ties to the curriculum when you get here.
Exactly. And that's one of the other key things that I think is really helpful for pre-health students to realize is this competency model is not the only competency model that they're going to encounter on their journey, right? So it's really a progression of competencies from the entry of medical school, throughout medical school, and then into residency. So competency-based education in medical schools is becoming more and more common. And when they enter residency, they have the ACGME competencies and milestones that's used, right, for evaluation. And so these things are just part of their journey going forward.
Yep. It's like kind of get used to it.
Yep. A little bit.
It's not going away. It's not going away. This is not just some academic thing that the AAMC came up with because it sounds nice and it gives some framework, but this is stuff that will continue with you on this journey through medicine. So it's not going away. All right. I want to bring Tami in. Laura's really teed this up in a nice way of like kind of giving some foundation and background philosophy. Let's talk some about the resources that you've developed around this competency framework. Where do you want to start with that, Tami? What do you want to highlight?
Well, I wanted to start by saying years ago, after they developed the competencies in the first place and we had published them, we started hearing from pre-health advisors and from learners and even from the medical schools asking for some way that they could see how they could demonstrate these competencies and recognize them out in the world. And so we knew that we needed to take a better approach than just listing under each definition, do it by doing this, or you can show it by doing this. We realized that we needed a comprehensive approach. So we convened a large group of people with instructional designers and former educators and content experts. And we decided, well, first of all, we needed some kind of guidebook. Not everybody has access to robust pre-health advisors. Not everyone is currently in an undergraduate institution or college. They may be doing this ad hoc on their own. So we needed a guidebook that they could reference and start learning about what each competency was. And then we also realized that not everyone understood the parts of an application and what they tell admissions officers and what they say about you, what they telegraph. So we wanted to do that and also demystify some of the process. Because also everybody's in a different place in their journey. So whereas one person might be steps away from applying, another person is just starting to think about the possibility of becoming a med student or applying to med school. So we have the guide, which has all of the information. And then we have the parts of an application and the components of the application, what they mean. We also have the assessment sheets. Where am I now? Where would I like to be and how can I get there is really what those self-assessment sheets are for. And then most important, I think, are the Anatomy of an Applicant student profile. And so what we did was we reached out to current medical students and their admissions officers that accepted them, as well as pre-health advisors. And we said, what do you think you did throughout your application and throughout your preparation period that helped you to telegraph these competencies? So we go through every part of their application and we get the point of view from each of these audiences. The student tells us from their point of view what it was like. The pre-health advisor weighs in on the advice and guidance that they gave throughout the process and the years that they worked with the student. And the admissions officer then comes in sort of at the end and will say, okay, here's what we saw when we looked at their personal statements, when we looked at their letters of evaluation. This is what we saw when we looked at their coursework. And at the end, we ask, why did you choose this medical school? And then we say, why did you choose this student to attend your medical school? And I think it is incredibly illuminating. Mm-hmm. A lot of experiences that you might not think were pivotal or explained where the student was able to show competency, let's say in empathy or resilience or reliability, come through in ways that you wouldn't expect. And we hope that this helps to guide people. You both mentioned that checkbox approach or the checklist approach. This is just awful when people say, okay, I'm going to do this, and this, and then I'll be prepared. Not everybody has that time, and not everyone has those resources. They don't realize that maybe one really long, meaningful duration with an experience or a project can demonstrate many of these competencies over time. So we see those in the profiles, especially. We have numerous profiles on our website, and we also have an archive of the older profiles because we really like to keep them up to date. We want people to see students that are currently in medical school, but some of those older profiles still have really worthwhile experiences also and tips. So those are available as well.
Yeah, they're outstanding, and I think it really kind of brings that human aspect into it. That you see, these are real people who were successful, and you can see that they had different experiences that demonstrated the things that were important to that medical school. Oh, it's chef's kiss. I want to come back to a couple of these new worksheets that you came up with this year. One of them, I love them both, is this Premed Competency Experiences worksheet. And again, this is in the show description. The link to it is, and it's in there. And it as a part of the application, when you go to do AMCAS, there's an experiences section, and there are 15, say, slots or fields that you can list your experiences. You don't have to fill in all 15, I don't think, but this is where you can, highlight those things that you're involved in. These experience sheets, you could start to document them. So I've on this show told people before, like, keep a living document, keep a Google Doc, keep a journal or something where you're documenting these experiences, contact names, hours you've done them, the start and end dates of things. And you've done that in this worksheet. And then what they've done is they've also attached the competencies to it so that right. When I saw this, Tami, I'm like, you know what I would have done? I would have made a binder. and like printed these out or something and made a little nerdy binder and kept all my experiences in there. And as I kept doing stuff, I'd write and fill things in. And we had a group meeting and things went well or they didn't go well, I'd come back and write, some stuff in there and add to this. And then for each one of your experiences, you have one of these little packets. When you listen, Laura brought up the self-reflection stuff earlier. This is where, when you go to write for your application, it's all right here. Your self-reflections would be in your little experiences like packet. I mean, am I right or am I wrong?
Well, of course you're right. Originally when we designed these, they were in that printed guide, and we would hand these out when we went to our in-person fairs. And over the years, we've increased the number of virtual offerings, obviously, that we do. And so what we realized was it's a lot harder to keep that nerdy binder of yours together if it's in some print document where you have to sort of cramp your writing into a box that's just defined on the page. By making it electronic, you can make as many copies as you need. You can update them, as you say. We hope that they will. We want people to go back, read it over, revisit, and see where they've had their growth. And, from a convenience point of view, you're putting down the name of the contact, the experience, the hours you worked. It's not only helpful for when you have to write essays or go through your secondaries, but when you're preparing for interviews. You want to refresh your memory, because anything you put in that application, you could be asked about in the interview. So this way you have a reference to go back to and read over. And you can share these with a pre-health advisor or a mentor so that you can see, where are my areas of opportunity? Perhaps where am I a little weaker or overrepresented? And again, you keep a record of this over time. We don't expect that people are going to be doing this, just over a couple of months. We hope that you start and use this at the beginning and throughout the process of preparing for medical school.
Yeah.
But I think that the beauty of this new experiences sheet is that understanding that with one experience, you can express many different competencies, and not just take that checklist approach. But we also know that people learn differently, people document differently. And so we have that other worksheet where you pick a competency and then you talk about the experience in a flipped model. Yeah. Because everybody has what they feel more comfortable with. So we like to give people both. And, there's no wrong answer. You just keep updating it as you go along.
And so on one hand, if you want to keep the experiences self-assessment, that's like kind of building your portfolio, if you wanted to think of it that way, as it grows, as you grow. And I think pre-health advisors, if they're not aware of this, could use these tools and sitting down with their advisees and, it's like putting these in front of them. Like, you could use it this way. You use the self-assessment for the competencies, or if you want to keep running like a portfolio record, create use these experiences packet. Either way. And I'll tell you this, in some of the pre-health offices use these similar types of competencies to help write their letters of evaluation. I know Johns Hopkins and their letters of recommendation, they ask their advisees to pick 3 of their competencies they felt like they were their strongest. And then their letter highlights those 3 areas that the student identified, and they help kind of corroborate through their experiences, like what they did to achieve, or why they feel they achieved or had that strong competency in the area. So these are used quite a bit in different areas. So it really highlights the importance of them.
One thing that I think people might not realize is that if they bring out their completed worksheets to an advising appointment and they have their advisor read it over, their advisor might actually be able to note other competencies that they haven't thought of that are being expressed, and have a deeper conversation about what was learned. So I think that it's really helpful to again share these with an advisor or a mentor or even a professor that's helping people through the process. And we know that people are using non-advisors and professors. They're in the various profile stories. You'll see that there are others that they're talking to. And so these could be shared with those people as well.
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Let's see. So we talked quite a bit about the competencies, the resources that are available. Tami, I want to give you the opportunity. There's a whole other host of other AAMC resources. And since I have you here, I want to kind of take some time. What other ones should we be pushing out or highlighting for listeners to look towards?
Absolutely. The AAMC has a wonderful array of free and no cost resources available, including the Premed Navigator, which is one of our most widely read publications. It's a monthly newsletter that goes out for free with important dates, information, tips. We've had advisors who have written articles there. You can sign up for it on our website. The link is included.
I'll link to it in the show description for sure.
We have the Aspiring Docs Diaries, which is our blog. It's been written for nearly 10 years now and has hundreds of entries from pre-health students, from actually early practice physicians, residents, and current medical students. It's wonderful because it goes over milestones that most of your listeners have either been through or are approaching, and it talks about what it's like, and some self-reflection is there. And they're usually pretty short, just 1 or 2 pages long, and they come out one every other month, perhaps. We get them. It's sort of cyclical. It goes with the academic year. We also have the virtual medical school fair, which now happens twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. We typically have between 80 to 100 medical schools from across the U.S. and Canada. And we also have various student groups like SNMA, HOSA, and so forth that join us. They're there to answer questions either generally about the medical school process or about certain policies within individual medical schools. And then we also have one day that's dedicated to information sessions. And those information sessions and the chats are available for 30 days after the live event. You can show up at any time within those 30 days. And afterwards, we take those information sessions and we put them in the AAMC's Vimeo and YouTube library. So they're always available free of charge. And they're really marvelous. They feature pre-health advisors, med students, and medical school admission staff speaking about many topics, from MCAT to the preview exam to writing a personal statement and so forth.
I'm going to just stop you right there real quick. Those virtual fairs, I think we've been on every one of them since you started them. They're fantastic. And so if listeners haven't participated in them, it's super easy. You just log in and there's like quote unquote booths. Every med school has like a booth and you can just pop in, and then there are people there. You communicate via chat and you just ask whatever questions you want. People like chat you back. You can DM certain people in the room. So I know when I'm in there, I get like 4 DM, like, okay, I'm going to hop over here and answer that. I mean, it's cool. And then you guys were kind enough to invite me to be on a panel. There were like 2,300 people in this talk. And that was a little bit, I didn't expect that many people. Tami, do you know how many thousands of people come to those virtual fairs? Like, isn't it like?
I do. Yeah, we're incredibly proud of them because we have had upwards of 13,000 people attend in a day. And we could not do that in person. You would not be able to have all of these conversations. And so you can have, like you mentioned, private conversations, you can have the public chat. And now we do have schools that have Zoom links so you can speak face to face with them if you'd like. We've come a long way with the fair, and it's really just a jewel in our crown. We're very pleased that we can do it. We keep it free. It really levels the playing field. Because for a long time, we heard about people who they couldn't take off of work. They didn't have the right clothing. They were shy. Yeah. They didn't have transportation. And now you can speak to people across the U.S. or, again, even in Canada or Puerto Rico, and you don't need to travel. It's pretty wonderful.
It's pretty amazing. It really is. we don't miss it now because we know the reach it has. And so I wanted to kind of interject there real quick so I would say to listeners, keep your eyes out for those virtual fair and you guys put it on your Twitter or X, and your other socials. But like when those come up, register for them. You can just pop in and out because they're usually from like 12 or like 11 o'clock in the morning until sometimes 7 o'clock at night or something. So you pop in and out throughout the day as your schedule allows, kind of thing. Okay. I interrupted you. What were a couple other things we hit the virtual fair and then what else?
Medical school admission requirements, MSAR. The AAMC has produced some sort of guide to medical schools for over 80 years. And once we went online with it, it spun off into two parts. So we have the official guide to medical school admissions, which is now a PDF. It's available for free in the AAMC store. And it's the guide, all the nuts and bolts to the process of applying, medical education, and so forth. Again, that's free on our website. Let me just tell you, I've got
to jump in again. I've looked at it. It is 133 pages of... If you don't know anything about medical school or this process, or your parents are like, what is this stuff you're trying to do? This is a comprehensive from beginning to end of how medical school education works. And there's data in it, and it talks about the application and the pre-stuff. It is fantastic. It is a great resource just if you want to sit down and understand the process from beginning to end. Sorry.
Yes, and we update it comprehensively every year. It was just updated in October, so all the data you see is new, and it reflects the current entering class that's there right now, the one that started this fall. Same with the medical school admission requirements, which is that second half of what used to be in the printed publication. There's so much information we can no longer print it. It would be about 20,000 pages if you tried. But it features every single U.S. and Canadian medical school that's MD granting, and has all the information you would need to know, the deadline dates, the policies, and all the data. So the data reflects the current class that just started this fall. And every year we update it comprehensively. In fact, right now, medical schools are looking at the new data for the class that was just seated, and that'll be available to everyone in the spring. No matter when you subscribe to the MSAR, if you subscribe to it, you will always see the new information populated. You don't have to pay for another subscription as it's updated, which could be daily. We allow schools to update their policies and information on a daily basis. We not only update it there, but we update it in the MSAR reports, which are 23 actually, 3 reports pulled from the MSAR that we update as schools update their policies or their deadlines or other information. But not only is that information there, you can keep track of notes for each one of the schools. You can keep a list of schools you're considering applying to or definitely applying to and rank those. You can send that list and the reasons why you're considering and applying to that school to your pre-health advisor or anyone else you'd like to share it to. And you can compare up to 10 schools side by side along different data points.
MSAR is awesome.
So it is.
And the layout is the same for every school. So when you go and like you're kind of doing your shopping and browsing, once you kind of get used to the flow of it, it's easy to find information versus going across the internet and finding this med school and okay, now where's their admissions button? Okay, there's admissions. Okay, what are their requirements? Let me try to find it. This is just one-stop shop, and the layout's the same for every school that's in there. And so it's quick and easy to then, like I said, to do the comparison and stuff. It's awesome. I love the MSAR. Big fan.
Thank you. Well, one of the most important things about MSAR is that we, the AAMC, provide the data to the schools. They do not provide it to us. So it's all apples to apples, as we would say, across every school. And we try to make things as transparent as possible. For instance, when you look at MCAT data, for instance, we show you for matriculants, for accepted applicants, for in-state, and for out-of-state applicants, so that you can gauge whether or not you're a competitive applicant at that school. And you can even put in your MCAT score, your GPA, to see where you fall within the chart for each medical school. So I think there's one more resource that I'd like to highlight that sort of sets the AAMC apart in my mind, and that's our fee assistance program. So the fee assistance program is a benefit that significantly reduces the registration fee for the MCAT exam, prep products. It includes a 2-year subscription to the MSAR, an AMCAS application with up to 20 medical school submissions, and it includes a fee waiver for the preview professional readiness exam. So this is a very robust benefit that we give out to students who, without this, would have a barrier for applying. And it's on our website. You can take a look at the frequently asked questions and the process for applying. But it is an essential resource for many people, and they definitely, even if you're unsure if you are qualified to receive the benefit, take a look. It's important to see what's in there and to at least apply for it.
And a lot of times medical schools, if you receive the fee waiver from AMCAS, when you receive secondary applications from medical schools, if you receive that fee waiver, the medical school will automatically waive the secondary fee. And some medical schools, like Case, if you get accepted, if you got the fee waiver, we waive our CSS profile, which is a financial aid application. So this can go kind of even beyond sometimes, depending on the school, after AMCAS AAMC things into the med school itself. So it is definitely worth looking into. Yeah. So again, links in the show notes for that. Wow. Did we leave anything out?
I don't think so. We covered a lot.
I know. We hit a lot of these. I mean, that's why there's so many resources out there. And so hopefully now we can kind of highlight them for people that can find the ones they like or the ones they want to tag and come back to later. There is one more. I found this one, like every year is the AMCAS Workbook. Like you can see like what the application looks like and the sections of it and stuff. Because AMCAS is it's a very deep application. I tell people, like, one of my lines is it's like the Common App that you did maybe go from high school to college. It's like the Common App on steroids. It has great depth. So you can see in the workbook all the different pieces of data, and it's also covered and touched on in some of these other resources that both Tami and Laura have talked about today. So I hope people, take some time to kind of go and bookmark some of these things, and because this will help really get you, I think, on some solid footing to understand what you're getting ready to embark on as an applicant. So thank you so much, you two. I'm so grateful for your time, and clearly you have such, a wealth of knowledge around these, and you're very excited and passionate about it, and we're for all the right reasons and helping applicants be successful. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks so much for having us on. This is great.
Yeah. All right.
Appreciate being here.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's get out there and start getting ready to apply to med school.
Let's do it. Good luck, everyone.
All right. Thanks. All right. See you, everybody.